Hi there, hope you're having a lovely day so far. As many of us are aware, in most states and territories, it has been on the advice of the Chief Health Officer during this period of the pandemic, with a view to save lives, that if a child is able to learn from home, you must ensure that your child does learn from home. Now, this has brought about a scale of homeschooling across our government and private schools that has never occurred in Australian history. Parents are not expected to teach or replace the role of a teacher, however, are asked to help observe and help support their children in their distant learning. So today, to help provide expert tips and advice for parents homeschooling their children, we welcome our special guest, Andrew Oberthur, a primary school principal with over 30 years experience and leading primary schools and children right throughout Brisbane. Now, in 2018, Andrew published his first book, Are You Ready for Primary School, this year, which is about building culture and a culture of trust, collaboration and inquiry between parents and teachers. Now, this is something that we really, really need at the moment. Now, I'm really honoured for your time, Andrew. How are you?
I'm very well, Rachel. It's lovely to be here.
Well, it's wonderful to have you and your time, and no doubt as a school principal, you're very, very busy at the moment. So yes, very honoured to have your time. Now, for any parent who is looking for support in their homeschooling at the moment, and possibly has missed our first chat that we had just last week, can you just share, I guess, the fundamental techniques that you recommend parents should be addressing each day to help support their children's education?
Sure. Rachel, the first thing I think parents need to do is establish a routine that works for them and their families. So as soon as the children would normally be returning to school, so for argument's sake, here in Queensland, next Monday, it's school returns. And in Victoria, kids have already started. And on Monday, the 27th, New South Wales children will start. So on that very first day, if mum and dad have preempted starting school with their children, and said to them a couple of days beforehand, children, next Monday, we're going to get up and follow our normal school routines, which means get up, have breakfast, get changed, and then say to them, our routine for homeschooling is going to be roughly like this. Now, in broad terms, families need to manage whatever works for them because every family is going to be different. Mm-hmm. If you're a mum and dad and you have one child at home and you're on leave and you're not working, then you can dedicate your whole attention to your single child and follow through whatever the school has sent home. But if you're a mum or dad or a single parent with 4 kids, and all of a sudden you've got to manage multiple kids, which I know we'll talk about shortly, then you've got to find a routine that works for you. And that's the key thing. And the other message I think is really important for parents is don't be a teacher. Don't try and be a teacher. First and foremost, you're your children's parent and stay in that role, but you do need to help facilitate and guide and provide space and time and structure for your child's learning during this unprecedented time.
Mm-hmm. 2 very important tips. And I guess it's one of those things that we're going to be sharing a lot more throughout the chat, but it's a good checklist, I guess, for parents to ensure that they are following those fundamental sort of points, I guess. Now, the transition for children from full on-site school learning to flexible and remote learning undoubtedly is taking some time to adjust to. What advice do you have for parents who may have children who possibly could be a little hard to self-govern or, let's say, are possibly misbehaving because, let's face it, they're with mum and dad and they can get away with it. So what's your advice here?
Look, it's going to be really difficult. My advice to parents would be set up some motivational techniques to say to the children, when we get X amount of work done, then we can have Y as a reward or as a treat to say, yes, we've done such and such. The other thing is, if parents can do it in small bite-sized pieces, it's going to be far more manageable for the child as well as for mum and dad. So don't expect 6 hours of online learning from your children at home. That is never going to happen. The educational authorities are realistically anticipating and encouraging an expectation of between 2 and 3 hours of learning per day of the curriculum. But I would recommend we break that up into 4 half-hour lots, for argument's sake, so that the child knows if they can read a clock, well, great, I've only got to work for half an hour and then I get a break or a reward or a treat of some description from mum and dad. It's going to require some attention from the adult, the caring adult, to be with those reluctant children. And the reality is, some children will think this is an extended holiday. Well, the reality is your teachers are probably going to be checking in with you most days, if not every day. They're going to be delivering work via a platform, a portal of some description, and they're expecting some work returned to them. So kids, yes, you've got to do some work, but let's do it in small bite-sized pieces, offer them rewards, treats, some form of motivation to say, get it done, then we get a break, and then repeat the cycle.
Mm-hmm. And on this point, I guess there's many distractions in the home and at a home, no doubt.
Yeah.
So do you have any advice for children who are, let's say, a little agitated with learning at home? They're throwing some temper tantrums and or could possibly just have a low attention span. Now, what tips do you have for parents with children that are just a little hard to keep focused?
Yeah, sure. A couple of things, Rachel, I would encourage families to do. One is establish a space for the child to do their learning. I wouldn't have it in their bedroom if at all possible. If possible, have them a space. If it needs to be in their room, that's fine, but mum and dad still need to be attentive with them, but have a dedicated space for the learning to take place so that when the children go to that space, they know that's the expectation. And when they move away from that space, we're not necessarily engaging with schoolwork anymore because I've moved away from my work desk, if you like. So make sure the children have a dedicated space. Make sure if attention span is short, keep it in bite-sized pieces. For the early years children, so this is age dependent, but if we had children in prep or kindy that are 4, 5, 6-year-olds, then I'm anticipating if you get 15 minutes out of them in one chunk, then that's an achievable amount for those children. For some children, it'll be less. For some children, it'll be more. The older the children go, then the longer we could anticipate them concentrating on a task for up to 30 minutes. And as the children get into high school, maybe even longer. But certainly in primary school, I'd be suggesting between 10, 15 minutes up to 30 minutes as a bite-sized amount of work they could get done at one sitting. Again, have some motivational things. Minimize the distractions also. So in the space that you set up for your children, you may want to have a timetable set for them, and they might want to have some ownership of the timetable. So they could actually say, great, we're going to do reading for 15 minutes. And once it's done, tick that off. That's a sense of achievement for the child. And then there's an achievement for mum and dad. Great, we've done reading, tick it off. Go and stretch your legs, have a break, play with the dog for 5 minutes. Let's go back to work, kids. And on the next on our list, we're going to do some numbers or some counting. Let's do 15 minutes, 20 minutes of numbers and counting. Great, we've done that. Tick it off. Have a break. So have achievable bite-sized pieces, minimal distractions on the child's desk, have a workspace dedicated to the formal learning, and then celebrate with little rewards once they can achieve something.
And what about the psychology of school uniforms? Obviously, you're not going to be dressing the children in their school uniform, but it is just the psychology of this is the time when we are learning and we're dedicating our time to learning. A lot of adults that have offices from home, would dress in work attire during business hours and then break that cycle by actually, say, putting on casual wear after that, as you would, as you know, when you drive home from work and you'll sort of change clothes, etc. Is this something that you suggest that we adopt during this period of the homeschooling at the moment to help with that mindset setting for kids?
Yeah, Rachel, it's a great question. In fact, I was asked that exact question by one of my teachers today. Are we expecting children to be wearing their uniforms during homeschooling? And I'm aware that some schools do have that expectation. I'm aware that some schools, when they log in each morning to see their children physically, as we're doing via this video link, that they're expecting the children in uniforms. Personally, as a principal, I'm not expecting children at home to be dressed in a uniform. I am expecting them not to be in their pajamas. So I think the actual transition and the normal routine of home, as in when we get up of a morning, kids, we have breakfast, we get dressed, does set that routine and expectation that this is no longer a holiday, that we are in fact having some dedicated learning time.
Mm-hmm.
I would hope not too many schools say, yes, you have to be in your uniform, but you do need to be out of your pajamas to say, look, I've moved from relaxation into a more formal time when I can attend to learning more easily.
Mm-hmm. I've had that experience in the corporate world where a large corporate organization I was working for, we had casual Fridays, and all of a sudden they stopped them because they were like, well, casual clothing is, casual frame of mind, that you sort of, you do dress and feel as you are in your clothing.
Correct.
So that's a really interesting point. Thank you for sharing that. But, overall, I guess frustrations during homeschooling, no doubt, is going to be really common, and children are really not used to being able to self-regulate their emotions, especially when they're unable to work out an equation or a problem that they usually would have one-on-one time with the teacher. So do you have any tips for parents to help their children in this situation, and how can children overcome setbacks to ensure that they are continually building on their confidence during this time?
Yeah, and it's really important, Rachel, because we don't want kids to go, oh, I'm going to struggle for the next 5 weeks. And we also don't want mum and dad to feel like they can't help. So a couple of things that I would suggest families may consider. The first thing is, make sure we use language which doesn't limit the child's ability to learn. What I mean by that is this: when a child says, mum and dad, I can't do something, mum and dad need to add the word yet to that phrase. So I can't do it yet. Now, that gives the opportunity for learning later on. It also gives the opportunity for mum and dad to review the problem. So if mum and dad can then say to their child, look, what do you think is meant by that problem? So if it's a maths equation or if it's an English task, if the child can rephrase it in their words, well, I think the teacher is asking me to do A, B, and C, mum and dad will know if they're on the right track. If mum and dad can explain it in their language and the child understands, fantastic. If mum and dad are reluctant to explain it for fear of teaching it in a different way or confusing their child, they simply have to say to the child, let's make a note of it, and we can give feedback to the teachers via the online platform to say, can you please catch me up with this problem? But it's important to have a positive mindset to say, I can't do it yet. It may not have been taught. It may be a new concept. It may be something that needs practice and drill. So we just have to make sure we give the opportunity for learning later when it's re-explained, rephrased. So say to a child, we can't do it yet. Critical message, absolutely.
Yes, great point. We published your article titled Tips for Parents with Children at Home, Alternative Education Provisions. Now, for someone who hasn't read the article yet, can you please just give us a little bit of an overview of what it's about and just what inspired you to write it?
Sure. Rachel, as you said, these are unprecedented times across the country and probably across the world where we're having the majority of our children are learning from home. And when families expect to be teaching their children from home, or in fact having their child learn from home, then I just tried to put a few simple thoughts down for families and for teachers to say, what's reality going to look like? Now, if you have one happy, engaged child who's a self-motivator, then learning from home will be an exciting challenge. If you have 4 children with ASD and you're a single parent, then learning is going to be a whole new world for you. And I think it's important to say to families, the curriculum will still be driven by the teachers.
Yes.
So mum and dad, we're not asking you to drive the curriculum. We're asking you to be a support, facilitator, guide during this period of time.
Yep.
The teacher should still be providing the curriculum and providing instructions during this time. So that's a really important message. The other thing is, let's value the learning that happens incidentally by just being at home.
Yes.
So for argument's sake, there's lots of things in and around the house which will provide valuable learning opportunities, which are incidental and what I call the hidden curriculum, apart from the traditional maths and English and science that the teachers will be sending home. Mm-hmm. And parents should embrace that. So let's do a couple of hours of the traditional curriculum set by the teachers, but then when you're cooking at home, engage the children. There is so much richness to what that experience can provide for the children. When you go for a walk in the garden or the park, there is so much richness in that experience. When you play board games with the children, when you open up a pack of cards, when you use dice for any games and activities, there are such rich learning opportunities beyond just the curriculum the teachers will be providing.
Yes, and we have another interview coming up this week, exactly on that. We've just recorded, and it's going to be published tomorrow. And from that perspective, it actually speaks about that. Is actually just putting a different lens on it at the moment. So for parents, not to be worried so much if your children you feel aren't learning as much. In their schooling and in their education at the moment academically, but from a life skill perspective, to have a different perspective on all the different situations at the moment. Children are learning resilience. They're learning about all kinds of things. So in every aspect of our day, see the lesson that there is a new for a child that maybe hasn't experienced. A lot of us haven't experienced the situations that we're living in each day, but put a different lens on our day. And aside from the national curriculum and their academic lessons which they are learning via homeschooling, don't think that it's just the education stops when the academic part of their day finishes. That the life skills and the life lessons are equally as important as you just mentioned. And it's just a matter of changing and shifting the perspective to be able to see the lessons in every which moment of the day in and around the home. So that's a really valid point, and thanks for sharing that. Now, I'd love to know from your perspective, how long could a parent expect their child to work at home in one single session?
Yeah, look, Rachel, age dependent. I would hope that for the little people, 4, 5 and 6 year olds, if you can get 5 to 15 minutes out of them in a sitting without them getting restless sitting in a chair, then that would be realistic. I had a parent ask me this morning, am I expecting children to follow a school timetable? Now, in a school timetable, we have a 2-hour block, a 2-hour block and a 1-hour block roughly. Now, I'm not expecting that for the children at home, because mums and dads have to manage their own family and work commitments while also managing a child at home and facilitate their learning. So I hope mums and dads can be realistic and kind to themselves,
yes,
without putting undue pressure on themselves. As a child gets into the middle grades of primary school and upper grades of primary school, you'd be expecting 20 to 30 minutes at a sitting, but then have a break, move on, have a reward, have a motivational treat, and then let's repeat the cycle. So in a primary school, you're realistic looking at 5 to 15 minutes for little people, 20 to 30 minutes for upper people. Those who are really studious might extend to 45 minutes. But look, I think that's realistic, and you break it up into, I'd be recommending 4 or 5 sessions in a day if possible, but accepting this is not perfect. This is going to be a whole new ball game for children, parents, and educators. So there will be some time for tweaking over the next week or so as parents adjust to the routines that they've established and how the delivery of the curriculum is being provided. So don't expect perfection, expect a positive mindset and an attempt.
And what about physical exercise as well? That should be incorporated into every day.
Absolutely. If I can give you an example of what we're doing here at school. So for the number of children who will come to school in my place, in my setting here, we're actually going to spend the first 45 minutes reading a story and giving them some physical activity so they can burn off some energy and then be ready to attend to learning. So of a morning, families might have a similar routine so that they might say, right, let's do some physical activity, which is part of the curriculum, and it's important to maintain their physical health as well as their mental well-being. So that's absolutely key. And again, break that up during the day. So grab a skipping rope, do some yoga, do some stretching, do some running around the house. Any physical activity that can keep their mind and body active will be critical during this time. Good for mums and dads as well as the children.
And when you think about the way that an average school day is broken up with recess and lunchtime, they have their physical activity broken up. So you think about it logically, how a normal day is broken up. So would you suggest to be able to, on their breaks, is to treat it as if it is a recess or a lunch break period where they would go outside and play?
Yeah, very much so. And I think it's important that the children can have some sense of routine, even though they wouldn't be having necessarily 2 hours locked in, diligent, hard work in one sitting. Even in a school day, we don't have children sit down for 2 hours without having a break, stretch, get up, move around, have a drink, have a munch and crunch, get some energy food. So even in a 2 hour session at a primary school, there are opportunities for kids to move, which is important. So when it comes to the lunch breaks, absolutely. Let's say to the kids, we're having a half hour or 45-minute lunch break. Let's go and run around and let's do some exercise and let's play a game and do something physical, which is really important.
This is a really interesting question, which I'm sure there's going to be countless parents around Australia that want to know the answer. So how do parents manage multiple children at home during homeschooling?
Good luck, pray. But the reality will be, if kids can have their own space, that's important. If mum and dad can dedicate time to the children, that's important. If they can have their own resources, so let's have our own pencil cases. Already in the media, we're seeing great images of happy families sitting at the dining room table with everyone smiling and getting on for homeschooling. I think the reality may somewhat differ when it comes to day 3, 4, 5 and beyond, when my brother is borrowing my pencil case and I didn't have permission, or we need to share such and such and they didn't allow me to. So that I think if they can have a dedicated space, reality is mum and dad may be going between multiple kids, and that's going to be a juggling act. I don't think there's any easy solution for this one. If mum and dad have the time and the patience and the energy, they may in fact say, well, look, I'll work with 1 or 2 children in the morning and I'll work with 1 or 2 children in the afternoon. That, of course, begs the question, how do you occupy the other 2 when the others are learning? So I just hope parents are kind to themselves, accept there are going to be limitations and accept this is going to be a challenge, but do the best they can, support the school. And that's another important message, Rachel, that families need to keep in regular contact with the school. So I'm hoping schools aren't just offloading 5 weeks worth of work and saying, I'll see you in 5 weeks.
Yes.
I'm expecting my staff, for example, to contact the families every morning as a whole class, and then to be available in the afternoon if families choose to check in with them. But certainly on a daily basis, I believe teachers should be checking with their families and saying, I've uploaded more work. I don't want parents to feel overwhelmed with 3 weeks worth of work. I want to drip feed the work to the families so that mum and dad go, this is manageable, I can attend to this, as opposed to getting a month's worth of work going, oh my Lord, how can I possibly address all of this over the next 4 weeks? Let's do it in manageable pieces for everybody.
Well, they always say the best way to eat an elephant is one bite at a time. So don't think of it as the
Absolutely.
whole thing. Just break it down into bite-sized chunks and one day at a time. Well, in your perspective, what are the priorities for homeschooling?
Look, the basics, maths and English will be the key subjects that children need to be doing. Children can be reading effectively anything, and then they could be doing a written response. Little people can even be doing a drawing, and that would be a valid literary response to a piece of literature. So it doesn't matter whether they're reading a newspaper, a comic, a camping magazine, or a novel. If children are reading, they can do a written response to that, and that should be doing every day. Which is critical. Similarly with maths, they need to be doing and following up their maths on a daily basis. They're the basics. A lot of science can happen in and around the home. Cooking and gardening will provide lots of science opportunities, and maths will also be found certainly in cooking. But those 2 subjects will be key. By virtue of doing an online platform, some of their tech skills will be enhanced probably, which is great. But I think if we maintain the basics, that will still establish the foundations for learning as for all subjects.
Okay. But what if a child doesn't understand and a parent can't help with something that they're asked to learn?
Yeah. And look, that's going to be the reality for some families. So firstly, use the language. I can't do it yet. The second step is make sure you take a note of it and give teachers feedback that day if possible. I'm anticipating that teachers will be providing a feedback platform, whether it be just via email or via some other parent portal, that they'll be able to provide the teachers with feedback on a regular basis. At that point, say to the teacher, my child, or if the child does it themselves, dear Mr. or Miss So-and-so, I didn't get this concept. Could you please explain it to me in another way?
Mm-hmm.
And that's asking the teachers to restate the question, rephrase the instruction in another forum. Hopefully the child will be able to grasp it then. But just make sure we do it in a positive mindset by saying, we can't do it yet.
Mm-hmm.
We'll follow up with the teacher, we'll get some feedback, and we'll have another crack at it. Because the child's self-esteem and their own mental well-being, as well as the parents, is really important to maintain during these new times.
Yes, because if they lose that self-esteem, they're going to, well, I don't want to do this, and it's too hard,
right. and
let me just go and sit on Fortnite for the rest of the day.
Yeah.
You know, which is not going to happen, of course.
No.
But, well, I mean, what other opportunities should children engage with beyond the planned curriculum?
Yeah, great. So, board games are a great way to enhance lots of life skills. So if parents have got board games with multiple kids, they can do those sort of things. I've already mentioned cooking. I've already mentioned gardening. A pack of cards is a great resource. So you can do lots of counting of a whole variety of things with a pack of cards. Similarly, with a dice, any board game that has a dice in it or multiple dice in it, you can do lots of different activities with dice in it. Looking around the house, and even in your office there and in my office here, there are shapes, there are colours. So there are very rich learning environments through multiple concepts and multiple platforms and environments that families can embrace just by living and being in the world. So mums and dads need to just identify any concepts. The child doesn't have to know they're learning when mum and dad ask them questions, but mum and dad can reinforce concepts such as spatial awareness and shapes and colours just by being where they are and asking them interesting questions about it. But I would suggest board games, pack of cards, dice, cooking, gardening. That will give children very rich learning opportunities, apart from the formal curriculum.
Mm-hmm. Well, you've given us a lot of information and a lot of insightful, helpful tips today. How would you best, summarise the key points for any parent at home listening?
Yeah, Rachel, I think firstly, mum and dads and parents and carers, firstly, look after themselves. That's going to be key. Look after their children and make sure that mums and dads stay as parents. Don't try and be a teacher. Stay sane, accept the limitations that will come with this new environment, but also support their child's learning journey. Let's do the basics well. Let's do English and let's do maths. Let's learn with the other hidden curriculum opportunities that life presents. And we will get through this. Let's remain positive. In a few weeks' time, hopefully we'll be back at school, learning in our normal environment. But in the meantime, if we can't do it, maintain a positive mindset by saying, I can't do it yet, which means I can learn at some other time. But let's be positive and we'll get through this.
Yeah, very powerful words. And thank you so much for your expertise and your time today, Andrew. If parents have got any other questions and or want to reach out to you, whereabouts can they find you?
Probably best to go to my website, which is www.creativecollaborativesolutions.net.
Wonderful. And we'll have that link in the introduction paragraph. Thank you again for your time. And I can't wait to chat with you again soon. Take care.
Look forward to it. Thanks, Rachel. Cheers.
Bye. Bye.